welcome to Talk Tantra to me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this beautiful conversation. I have today Mystic Dylan, who is a celebrity witch. He is also a best-selling author and is the owner of the Olde World Emporium here in Santa Clarita, California. Thank you so much for being here, Dylan.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Well, having me in the shop.
Yes.
But still having me.
On the podcast.
On the podcast together in my shop, but having me.
Yes, absolutely. And we're just in kind of a back room that Dylan uses for reading.
Yeah, this is our reading room, and it's coming together.
Yeah, and he's done a couple readings for me, which have been insanely on point. So definitely check Dylan out. Do you do virtual readings as well?
I do.
Cool.
Yeah, it's hard, like, with technology now. I mean, I didn't before the pandemic, but I think with the pandemic, everyone, like, Zoom.
Yeah, they zoomed to figure it out, and Zoom made space for that, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'd love to get started by chatting a little bit more about how you found spirituality and magic and kind of your passion and purpose.
Yeah, I think in regards to finding spirituality, like, I feel like, you know, it's nature versus nurture. So I feel like my parents were innately spiritual. They've always kind of been spiritual. They didn't push anything on me. But I think there was always this belief that I had. You know, as a kid, I think we're very young and open and we have active imaginations. And I realized as I was getting older that active imagination never really went away. Mm-hmm. So then you have to ask yourself, am I crazy or is it real? And I think I always had a heightened intuition. I always kind of felt things or saw things, I think, on the periphery. And then the more that I was kind of a book nerd. Mm-hmm. So the more that I studied and I looked into things, I think that there was kind of this, something that just pulled me to it. So it was like you would read something, it would be verified in my practice, and then I started meeting other people who led me along that way, and I also think a lot of my folk beliefs, if you strip the religious or dogmatic aspect of religion, there were a lot of these superstitions and stuff that my family always had. Mm-hmm. My grandmother is Cuban and half Jewish, and like my father was Catholic, and so there were just so many different things that intertwined, and I think it was just a combination of that, and that is pretty much the basis for my practice today.
Beautiful. And I love getting this context of having these multicultural religious backgrounds, which I definitely want to get into more. Before that, though, touching on this idea of like feeling and seeing things and just sensing this energetic world around us. And I think that that's something that a lot of people listening to the podcast can identify with that. And on that token, you know, how do you know if you're experiencing magic or if you're a witch or wizard?
That is a wonderful question. And I think the first thing is that, like, to me at least, like, I think I identify as a witch. Like, wizard is very, like, kind of fantastical, Harry Potter. Warlock actually means oath breaker. But so, like, I feel like witches are, like, gender neutral. So, like, I identify as a witch. And I think in terms of knowing, one, I think everyone has, to me, what makes a witch is the manipulation of nature, you know? So, as a witch casts spells, they do charms. They do what needs to be done in order to as I was taught, witchcraft is wishcraft. So you are putting your intent out there to get what you want. So that's really what makes a witch. And I think when you know that that is within your realm, is really, and like, I think it is feeling. I think it's an understanding. Is an understanding of, I think you have to be empathetic. I think you have to be intuitive. And intuition is not something that is a gift per se. I think everyone has intuition. It's a matter of how we use it. And I think, you know, if you have these desires to, and there's such a bad stigma against the word manipulate, but if you have these desires to tip the scales of fate to get what you want, I think that is within the reach of having gifts attributed to witchcraft. Because witchcraft is using herbs or saying words to kind of influence nature, so to speak. But I also think another thing too, for whether it be psychic or intuitive or however, it is that imagination. I think if you have an active imagination, if you are able to truly feel and give into your senses, then I think you have the abilities to be spiritual or do these things. Because it's like, you know, I'm sure you've met a lot of people that are like, I can't meditate.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell you how many people that, like, I find it so crazy. Like, I have crazy ass dreams. I will meet people that be like, I don't dream. How? Like I just couldn't even, you know?
Yeah.
So I think those are kind of the hints. If you can dream, if you can imagine, if you can look in the clouds and see figures, chances are you can do witchcraft.
Yeah, beautiful. Great context to put it in. And it sounds like this can manifest in many different ways, but a lot of it comes down to intention, which to me is so parallel to Tantra. Like, it's kind of creating this lifestyle, and it's not really, it doesn't matter exactly what it looks like as long as it's in alignment with like your highest good and your greatest intention. And I think that that's really, really a beautiful aspect of this world.
Yes. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions about that too, because, and I will say, like, spirituality in general, or gifts, everyone talks about gifts. There is a misconception that I think that needs to be hereditary. And I think if there's one thing, it's like, I would love to dispel that. Like, oh, my parents weren't witches, I can't be a witch. It's like, well, no, like, that's not true. And I always tell people, if you go back, everyone has folk beliefs. Everyone has these superstitions. There is magic steeped in those superstitions. If you go back to before any Judeo-Christian religion in our timeline, which everyone has, we all have pagan ancestors. We all have family that practice some folk belief, even if they were within religion or church.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, with meditation, I don't think you're born with the gift to meditate. You know, I think it's something that we put up this block, you know?
To me, meditation can mean so many different things, though, but it's really just being present and aware of what's going on in your mind. It's not like you have a blank slate. So super interesting to put it that way. And I'd love to even go a little deeper into talking about, you know, this hereditary belief around witchcraft and spirituality. And, you know, even when we talk about religion, a lot of times, like, you know, there's belief that you can't truly be Jewish unless you are, you know, have this lineage, right? And you wrote this incredible book. What's it called again?
The Witch's Guide to Manifestation.
Yes, which I read, and it's great. And one of the things that I loved so much about the book was how accessible it made magic and how inclusive it was to, like, all cultures and genders and, you know, religious backgrounds, etc. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper into chatting about your book and that aspect of things.
Absolutely. And so when I wrote this book, I wrote it because there was a lot of people who were like, oh, I'm practicing the secret, which is not really that secret. Like, people act like manifestation is this, like, unknown thing, but all manifestation is putting an intent out there and working towards it and making it happen. You know, you manifest your you can manifest jobs, you can manifest income, you can manifest love, all those things. Where it aligns is, like, I guess in my mind when I was writing this book, it was a lot of, well, I would hear the secret and I would hear manifestation. I was like, that's witchcraft. But if you tell someone that, no.
Blasphemy.
No, no, not at all. And, like, but it is.
It's like praying.
It is. And prayer is the same as spell work. You know? You are putting an intention out there. You are doing the work to enact some change. In prayer, maybe the intent is to catch the ear of God, you know? In spell work, you are putting it into the universe or nature or whoever. And manifestation is the same thing. When you make a vision board, you are doing a spell. You know? So I think when I started writing this book, I wanted to show people the different parallels between prayer and magic, because magic is action. It's taking action. I think prayer is passive in the sense, because I think prayer is asking God for something, whereas when you manifest or when you do spell work, you are taking the middleman out. And I will tell you, that is why witchcraft is feared. Forget the concept of black magic, which actually has a lot of racial connotations. Forget the concept of anything like that. What scared people is that you have now taken God out of the equation, and
you are God.
You are doing things for yourself. So what ends up happening? All those priests, all those middlemen who are the middlemen for God, they're now like, shit, no one's gonna come here, because they're gonna go to the witch who lives in the woods and they're gonna ask her to do something. So that's where you get the fear. That's where you get the concept. Excuse me. And then the other thing too, one of the biggest, like, you know, there's a lot of misogyny in regards to the stigma against witchcraft too, because in the Bible, well, not in the Bible, so I believe it was Pope Francis, at some point, he decides that you can no longer use herbs that offer contraception, and you can no longer use herbs that ease labor, okay? Well, in the Bible, it says that women must endure the pain of labor, okay? So the moment these midwives started using herbs and stuff to ease this labor pain, they were doing the devil's work. They were getting in the way, so they're persecuted. So, and if you look at witchcraft, I think why is witchcraft closely associated with more women than men is because women are the ones that are using the herb craft. Women are the ones that a lot of witchcraft was for life and death. It was to heal, it was to ease pain, it was to cause pregnancy, it was to eradicate pregnancy. I mean, there are a lot of herbs that were used for abortion back in the day, a lot of, and all that was seen as something that was not through the hand of God.
Yeah.
But then what's funny is if you offer the flip side, didn't God create nature? So in sense, you are using the nature of God to assist in whatever. So it's crazy.
Yes, yes. There's so many beautiful pieces in there. And I want to also direct the listener to, we have a podcast episode about the spiritual experience of abortion. So
oh,
you can
okay.
get it from
well, there we go.
that lens. And then there's also an episode with Paige about holistic sexuality, and we also talk about some of the herbs that are used to induce miscarriage. So there's some other resources out there if people are listening and wanting more information of that kind. That being said, you know, expanding on this idea of empowering yourself by becoming the god of your reality, using something like witchcraft. To me, it's so parallel with how I view sexuality. To me, sexuality or sexual energy is the most powerful energy in our bodies. And so when the church makes people afraid of sexuality, it's because they want to disempower you, you know? And so by reclaiming your sexuality, you're actually really reclaiming that divinity, which is super beautiful.
I agree. And actually, I was taught that in order to enact magic or spell work or manifestation, you need to be aroused. Not necessarily sexually, but you have to feel it.
Have that life force.
You have to
flowing.
give into that.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, and not to say like I was an aroused kid, but I think the reason that I knew that there was magic as a kid is because I felt it. I felt it in my body. I felt this sensation. And when I do magic, when I practice spell work, I know that I give over to something.
Yeah.
Whether it be in a trip, because a lot of my practice includes like these trips or these going to astral realms and doing things like that. But I'm giving myself over to this higher state, but it's also within us, you know? Because what is ecstasy? Ecstasy is release, right?
Yeah.
It's that ecstatic sense of releasing to the inhibitions, to the primordial feelings of whatever. So I also believe that. I think one, sex and magic are very linked. Sex and witchcraft are very linked, you know? And two, I think, you know, when I do my manifestation or when I do spell work, there is that sense of like, I don't know, I feel like there's a bit of sexuality in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do a bit of what I call sex magic, and there's, you know, resources for that on this podcast as well. But it's definitely understanding that, like, having a sense of feeling like turned on is such a powerful energy to pair with intention, to pair with prayer or spell work.
It's so true. I 100% agree.
Beautiful. Cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I will tell you something. I don't know if you've ever heard, have you heard of, you know, the whole concept of stereotypically witches ride brooms?
Yeah.
Well, there's historically a meaning behind that.
What is it?
That they would make a flying ointment.
Okay.
And they would put the flying ointment on the end of a broom, and they would physically ride the broom.
Okay.
So these psychotropic drugs would be put on the end of a broom that they would ride, and they would trip out, and they would fly.
Wait, so would you insert it inside of you?
Yes.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yes. So
you have flying ointment here.
Yes, but it's for external use only.
Okay, good to know. Because I was about to go get some.
Let's not. And there's a broom right there. There's a broom right there. And you're like, let's go. So that is something that is, you know, when you look at the witch trials and stuff, they mention that. They mention these ointments. They mention these things, and they use psychotropic drugs to kind of enact that. And once again, it's like, look how sexual that is.
Yeah.
You know? And look at even, like, the broom. It is, you have the shaft, and then you have the handle, so you have all these things. So you have the female aspect, you have the male aspect. So there are many different aspects. Like, you find a lot of sexual connotations and symbology and it's all within witchcraft, you know. All the pagan gods, they're naked. They're doing their thing.
Love it. Absolutely.
Because we embrace that, but the church.
Scary.
Yeah.
It's scary because that means that they don't have the power anymore.
Of
and
course.
we do. And I love that you also touched in on this sort of masculine and feminine aspect in witchcraft, because that's such a huge part of Tantra as well. So it's really this parallel world. And getting into that, I'd love to kind of shift into, you know, the queer community, and also talking about non-binary, seeing how inclusivity works in magic in that world.
Absolutely. You see that, and I will say I think there's a reason why, as we progress, more people are accepting of their needs sexually, of what they want, of who they are, of their identity. And you see a reason why there is this pull away from the church and those dogmatic religions. Because historically, paganism, witchcraft, nature magic, all this stuff has embraced these people. So you have in Native American, you have the twin spirit. You know, so you have that. You also have a lot of pagan deities that are bi, or actually there's no ancient Latin word for bi or gay or straight.
Yeah.
You just loved who you loved.
Yeah.
So Apollo, who is a well-known deity, he loves men and women. Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, loves men and women. And you see history, even Achilles, who's not a deity, but he was a Greek hero, he falls in love with his friend, and when he's slain, he mourns him, and they have this love. So I think if you look at the ancient world, you see this dynamic, and I think we've closed the gap on that. And I think the revival of these ancient practices and beliefs helps rip that open again. So I think witchcraft is very open because we embrace the feminine, the masculine, and everything in between.
Beautiful, wonderfully put. And as the collective conscious evolves, as we ascend, or, you know, there's so many different ways to put this, but as we move forward, how do you perceive this shifting in, like, the collective and also in this community?
I think the more that we tap into, if we get out of gender and go more into our feelings and what we feel, I think that's going to help shape us. You know, look at fashion now. Like, fashion, I think, has been so accepting as of late.
Yeah.
You know? And I think we see it. We see it with Billy Porter. We see it with all these actors who are now taking a stand and not being afraid to wear dresses because they like them, or whatever the case may be. I think our spirituality and magic is going to shift that too. Because I will say, like, when I practice magic, or when I go to people, I've never, I think 10 years ago, there was I'm in love with a man, I need a spell to get this man. More and more, it's I'm in love with this person. The gender is not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is also shaping too. I think people are becoming more aware of their emotions and their feelings. So I do think as a whole, we are becoming more well-rounded. What's going to end up happening, or what I foresee, and I already see it happening, is that the more that these religions, these dogmatic religions, stay the same, more people are going to embrace non-dogmatic religions and spirituality like witchcraft, because I think witchcraft is a way, it offers liberation. The other thing too that I will say too, witchcraft, the word has always had a negative connotation. So by taking on the word witch, you are the rebel.
Yeah.
And this is room for, like, witchcraft does not stereotype. Witchcraft does not, it offers no stigma. There is no room for racism. There's no room for ableism in witchcraft. There's no room for, homophobia. There's no room for these stigmas under the umbrella of witchcraft.
Yeah, I definitely deeply resonate with that. Beautifully put. And I'd love to, go a little bit deeper into talking about how witchcraft really overlaps with, intimacy and love and sex. Can you talk into that?
Absolutely. Well, one, I think witchcraft is the first recorded spell that we have is a love spell. And I think that says a lot in terms of what witchcraft is.
Yeah.
Because it is that manipulation of energies. It is for people. It is getting people. It is a world of seduction. The herbs that we use are used in sex and for sex magic. We have Damiana, which is an aphrodisiac.
That's actually what I'm drinking right now.
Shut up.
It was just recommended to me like last week. I immediately ordered some. So
yes. So Damiana is an aphrodisiac. We have mandrake that is used in love magic because it looks like a person. So there are so many of these sexual herbs and sexual nature. And the other thing that you see too is that in traditional witchcraft, there's something called the witch's father or the folk devil. And it's not the Christian devil, but he is the horned god, He represents sex. You have Pan, who represents sex. And isn't it funny that the caricature of the Christian devil resembles these gods?
Yeah,
they have
wild.
the legs of a goat, they have horns. He's red. Red represents passion and sexuality. So I think there is so much freedom sexually in witchcraft and in paganism and in these alternative spiritual beliefs. And Christianity was like, whoa, 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 this is this. Oh, you're worshiping a pagan god of sexuality? That is our Christian devil. That is Satan, And I think that is something that is so... you can see it. You can see it. I mean, even, and not to bring up but like Lucifer. Lucifer is a Roman deity of light, and he also represents Venus. But Venus is a planet associated with love and sex. And isn't it funny that now that name is associated with the devil?
Fascinating.
Because,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you think of Lucifer, you don't think of this Roman deity of light associated with sex and Venus. You think of Satan.
Yeah.
You think of a name for the devil. And I think if you look at, all these things, you're going to find that. Look at the goat, Pagans utilize the goat for fertility, and the masculine and the horns, and they're phallic. But they're also associated with the devil. Literally everything that is sexual in nature is associated with the devil. And you have Eve, right? Who is this woman, okay? And all of a sudden, once she gains sexual awakening, she is the pariah who can no longer be in the garden. She is shunned for her knowledge. and she's kicked out and she's cast out. And I think that that is where the true magic is. There's magic in our sexuality. There's magic in what we can accomplish. There's magic in our control. And I think within witchcraft, what makes it dangerous is when we play with love, when we play with emotions, when we are able to decide it. Because think about it, like now we can decide if we want a child or not because we put on a rubber, you know, or you take birth control. 3,000 years ago, the way that you found that out was taking those herbs.
Yeah.
Herbs that had contraceptive properties, herbs that issued abortion. I mean, all that falls within the realm of sex. And I think witchcraft controls a lot of sex. And they utilize sex. And because they work with sex, it's demonized.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so enticing, I think, for so many people because we're moving from this place of, I don't really identify with religion and I deeply desire liberation, but at the same time, like, I want to have this connection to spirit in some way, in magic or tantra, you know, offer something like that, which is really beautiful for people to have that out.
And I agree. And I think I have a lot of people who come into our shop. It's a witchcraft shop. And they're afraid and they're like, you know, I want to do these things. I want to have this dose of spirituality, but I'm afraid of this word, or I'm afraid of practicing witchcraft. And I always tell people, it's like, don't, because all witchcraft is control. You are afraid of controlling your own destiny.
Amen. Literally amen as we're talking about.
That's right.
You know, but I think that it's a really beautiful perspective where you're coming back to this idea of inclusivity, you know, talking about really being accepting of all religions too and seeing the magic in each of those. You know, before we started, you know, recording, we were talking about your neighbors are a Catholic church and you sell rosaries, which is amazing. Because
everything is a sign and symbol, right? So that is their totem or amulet of protection. You know, we also sell a lot of candles to Catholics too. But what's funny is that, you know, I'll make a candle for St. Anthony, and I'll put the intention that they have of utilizing St. Anthony for his benefits, but that is no different than doing a spell candle for protection.
Yeah.
You know? And I think St. Anthony also helps finding lost things, okay? So sometimes people want to find their way, or they want to find a good job, or they want to pave the way for something, right? Okay? Well, say that someone else comes in and they're like, well, you know, I hate my job now, I want to find another one. I may do a St. Anthony candle for them because it's going to offer the same intent even if they're not Catholic. Because that symbolism and that energy is already there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting for me even. I feel like witchcraft or finding like my own magic is what led me back to Christianity.
Yes.
You know, I grew up in a very conservative environment. I really just saw all the contradictions in the church and I thought, not for me, but I still feel that there's some element of spirit in my life. And then I started to learn the real stories of Mary Magdalene, of Mother Mary, of Jesus, that were not necessarily the, you know, demonizing of
course,
of the modern perspective of, you know, religion.
And I will say it, like, Jesus was a sorcerer. He was a witch. You know, he was a rebel. He spoke his truth. And let's add in the magical elements of turning water into wine.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, he did it through the power of God, or he was God, or he was the Son of God. So you have that. But then that's no different from someone utilizing aspects of spirits to do something, you know? So I really feel that you have these wonderful, like, everyone's like, oh, you're a witch, so you're anti-Christian. That's not true. There are so many stories in Christianity that I love, and I think the parables are wonderful. And actually, if you look at American folk magic or Southern folk magic, a lot of those spells utilize psalms, you know? I mean, there's a woman, she's a wonderful friend of mine. She practices hoodoo, which is African folk magic, African-American folk magic. And, you know, she, in order to, before everything, she'll say the Lord's Prayer over something. When she does a spell, she'll do Psalm whatever over this thing. So, like, there's a lot of Christianity and Catholicism and use of the Bible in magic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for expanding on that a bit deeper. And I'd love to kind of shift now into, closing up with some last questions here. But first of all, what are some resources that people can maybe, go into to get a little bit more sense of, the intimacy and the sex and the love part of magic? And I know there's probably like a ton of different things like herbs and crystals and oracle cards and,
Yes.
books. But if you have any, intro sort of things that people might enjoy.
I'm trying to think, like, off the top of my head. Like, there's a wonderful book on, I would say, honestly, the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft.
Okay.
It's by Judica Illes. It offers a wonderful resource of dedicated to, like, love, passion, and sex, and, like, aphrodisiacs and all those things. And I think that is such a great resource because you will see, not just get a good context of what witchcraft is, but you will also get a full resource in terms of witchcraft in regards to sexuality, where witchcraft stands in the queer community, what witchcraft can offer you. So I always recommend that book. That would be my number one. The other thing that I would say too is that, like, I think in terms of love or sex or anything, I'm going to say a stone is carnelian. It's a wonderful stone, and rose quartz for the heart.
Yeah.
And then there's something called a chalk rub. Have you heard of
Yes.
that?
Yes.
I'm all about that chalk rub.
I love it. Beautiful. Would you be open to sharing like a simple love spell of some kind?
Yes, it's a honey jar spell. It's quick, it's easy. You get honey. You put in some rose petals. You put in some lavender. If there is someone that you admire or that you're looking to bring in, you write that person's name in red ink, fold it 3 times, put it in the honey jar, take a pink candle, put it on top of the jar, light it, let the candle melt over the jar, and then you just give it a really good shake, and then you just do it again for about a week. The only thing that I tell people is that you got to follow through.
Yeah.
So if you love Bob and he works on the 3rd floor of an office, you got to make it to the 3rd floor to talk to Bob. It can't just be one of those like, I love Bob, let me do this honey jar, he's going to find me.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? So, but that's kind of my favorite because that's also intent, right? And I think the thing with spell work, where spell work is different than prayer, is that prayer is, dear God, whoever, please hear me and make this happen. Spell work is, okay, I love Bob. I'm going to make Bob love me. You're already putting it out there. You're doing the work with the intention of having Bob catch your eye. And then think of it, say that at baseline, witchcraft is a, it's a stepping stone to motivate yourself. Well, then when you see Bob, subconscious, you're like, this spell is working. So you're turning on the looks, you're doing your thing, you're catching Bob's eye, and then maybe you'll get the courage to talk to him or initiate, or maybe he'll see you looking at him and he'll talk to you. And then you will say to yourself, oh, it was this spell. But I think it's all encompassing. But that's a really easy one.
Bob has something great coming for him. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a good piece to work in conjunction with a few episodes ago. I talked about how to manifest your ideal lover or partner. So do the honey jar spell, listen to the other episode. You're on your way to your dream partner.
Absolutely. It's all part of the work.
Indeed, absolutely. So last question here it's a bonus question that I ask everyone. What turns you on? What awakens your arrows? What makes you feel erotically alive?
Ooh. It's so funny because you ask me often, I was like, I thought about it and whatever. I think initiative. I think when people take initiative or they do something, that's exciting. I also have, I think for me, and I don't know if it's because, like, I came out really young, so at like 13, so I never had this like in the closet moment. So I think the idea of being caught or like that turns me on too. It's like doing something with the possibility of getting discovered.
Yeah, I resonate with that as well.
Yeah.
There's not much that like really turns me off, if I'm honest, but
actually, you know what? Yeah. No. I think I can think of maybe one thing that would be a boner kill, but other than that,
Cool. So where can people find or follow you?
So on Instagram, it's at Mystic Dylan Official.
Okay.
And then you can follow my shop at the Olde World Emporium. And if you want to book a reading with me, oldworldemporium.com.
Beautiful.
Old with an E.
Yes, and the shop is in Santa Clarita,
Yes.
For those interested, and you do all kinds of events and beautiful things here.
Yeah.
So a great way to get some community too.
Awesome.
Which is important.
Yes.
So thank you again for
Thank
joining
you.
me today. It's always amazing to see you.
Yes.
And also want to thank the listener. Thank you so much for
Thank
opening
you.
yourself up to the idea of magic and sex and expanding intimacy.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.